Hi, colleagues. It's John Fischetti, along with my co-host Scott Emig, and welcome to episode 11 of We Will Get Through This, Transformative Leadership for Disruptive Times. And today, Scott, we have an amazing episode with one of our favorite people, Kim Moroney, who's the Early Learning Education Officer for the Catholic Schools Office here in the Maitland-Newcastle Diocese around Newcastle, Australia.
Hello, everyone. Hi. Hi, Scott. Hi, John.
Hey,
Hi,
Kim.
Kim. It's wonderful having you here. So Kim, as you know, the purpose of this podcast, it's really a series that we've created to reflect and create opportunities for sharing for school leaders around Australia to really come together and talk about not only how they're dealing with the current crises, but looking forward. How are they planning on coming out of this in new and inventive ways? And so we were really excited that you were willing to come and share some of your knowledge with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, and it's wonderful to have a conversation with you at this very interesting time on a global scale.
Absolutely. Kim, before we get into the details of where we are, do you mind sharing with the listeners and viewers your vision for what the early childhood experience, and particularly in a place that might be called a school or a center? You've developed a framework that's extraordinary, and your view and the diocese here is so amazing in its vision. Tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
We have an early learning policy which has been developed since about 2016, but it was launched in about 2018. And it's based on a deep, rich philosophy about the image of the child as a capable, creative, confident learner that has their own ideas and contributions to their own education. So it's very important for us that our philosophies are deeply embedded on the image of the child. And through that, we have key elements that we really unpack and think about with pedagogy and practice. And they are, first and foremost, the child, we believe, is a spiritual person. And we believe that play is crucial to children. We talk about play for the child is essential as breathing. And we make sure that that is a foundational principle in our Catholic schools, kindergarten, year 1 and year 2 especially. That's the lens when we're talking about early learning in schools. The policy is deeply embedded also about transitions into school and through school. We have another key element of environments reflecting children and where they are, where they come from, a sense of belonging, the beauty of the environment, intentional, meaningful environments. So we've been re-imaging classrooms and playgrounds. And of course, in all of this, we think about another key element. We talk about data, but when we talk about that, we talk about deeply knowing children and observing them, a pedagogy of listening and observation, so that we are collecting, we really deeply know them and collecting that through that data lens. So that's been going on for a few years, and the last couple of years, this is the second year, I've developed a project, an action research project with my friend and colleague, Dr. Cathys Harrison, and that's Successful Foundations. And that's all about play as children transition into kindergarten.
Kim, before we get going, tell us a little bit more about your background in education. Your passion is amazing. What is it driven from? What are your prior experiences that brought you here?
Well, after leaving uni, I felt I always wanted to be a teacher, and my interest particularly was in early childhood education. So my master's is in early childhood education and leadership, but I've always been driven by an interest in school and the early years of school. And I guess I've got so many wonderful experiences with colleagues that are in private school settings, and just looking at the learning and the play of children there through that early childhood lens, and thinking that we could do so much to learn from those colleagues in those settings. And I wanted to I've been passionate about what that then looks like for our children in school, that they don't come over the threshold of coming to school and thinking learning changes, that play is ever present for the child and it's their right. So I've just had this, for a long, long time, this fascination with and a drive to advocate, I guess, for children in the early years of school. And my experiences, I've taught in prior to school settings when I first left university, but then I became involved in Catholic education through the Diocese of Maitland, Newcastle, and I've taught kindergarten to year 6. I've been in different leadership positions: religious education coordinator, AP, acting principal. The last school I was at, St. Joseph's Merryweather, for 9 years in different roles. And I was offered a secondment here, and that secondment changed into a position. They advertised it and I applied for it and got it, as Education Officer, Early Learning.
That's fantastic, Kim. You bring such a wealth of experience. You've used a word over and over, and it's actually on the wall behind you, play.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of current principals, deputies who are listening right now, and talk to us about, and from your own experience, talk to us about the power of play. And you talk about how it's for early years, but what are the benefits if we, you said you were K6. What are the benefits, if we look higher than the early years?
Before I even do that, I'd like to say that I have been influenced by places that I've been to and where I've had opportunities to spend time. And I have been influenced by Reggio Emilia. I've studied in Reggio Emilia. I've spent time in schools in Finland and Sweden, and I've also had the incredible experience of spending time in Anji in China. And in all of those contexts, for me, play has been foundational. For whether from the child in their very first, months of life, right through, and I think we're re-imaging childhood right through to 18 years of age, and what does play look like for children across those ages. What I think I'm very interested in is the child's self-determined play, the chance for children to be away from being regulated all the time, for us defining children within learning intentions and success criteria, away from adults putting outcomes on what the play will be, but for children to have opportunities to deeply engage in play, open-ended opportunities to immerse themselves in creativity, imagination, construction, problem solving. It's all there in play. And it might be that child in the sandpit, it might be the child stacking blocks, it might be the child who is deeply interested in drawing and problem solving. It's all there in play.
Kim, how have you resisted, particularly with your framework, the temptation to use those early years as pre-testing years for the big state tests that all around the world typically start about year 3 and go on forever after that? And for many schools around the world, they've turned even preschool into early testing years. So we really have testing centers rather than learning centers, even at kindergarten. How have you resisted that? And is it the power of moral suasion? Are you using the research? Or have you just put a force field around that stuff because you can show results later on that you're actually causing benefit, and let the test be a result, not a purpose, which is what you've articulated so well in that discussion on play?
I think it's a combination of several of the things that you mentioned, John. Our work is deeply embedded in research. So that's crucially important. The research of so many on a global scale about play and the benefits of play for learning, for development, and incredibly and importantly for well-being. So I think that research is there. Then we took the research and we wanted it to be action research. So we started working with teachers around, again, image of the child, seeing the capabilities of children as they come to us. What are they? How do we know them? How do we know capabilities or needs or interests if we don't step back and deeply observe and listen? And it talking about how sometimes things are very superficial in those type of screeners or so-called testing. You know, we can find out so many things by looking and listening and observing. And I think as teachers become more familiar with that, because I believe they hold that deeply in their core, that dignity of the child and respect for the child as human, and that they are fully human. We're not waiting for them to become human in 18 years when they become an adult. No, we're really deeply engaging them as a person fully human with dignity. So if we step back and we look, we can, some of those things on those checklists, we know those within spending a half an hour with a child. We don't need those type of screeners in a general sense. And being very, sorry, there's just something that popped up on my screen. Being very sure that the pedagogies we choose are our own. So there's ways of doing things, but our pedagogy, there's expectations, but the pedagogy is, as a teacher, it's your right and your responsibility to choose what's best for your children. And it's looking at things with a lens of, is this respectful to the child as human? There are times we do a lot of work with formative assessment. We do a lot of that concept of observation and listening. We certainly write things, we do a lot of writing down observations, looking at learning dispositions, looking at general capabilities. And of course, we have curriculum that's very important, and we're legally bound by that. But there's ways of doing things, not just through that testing, sometimes very low level skills, when these children can do amazing things, but sometimes we don't see it because we don't give them the opportunity to show it.
Kim, you have a very comprehensive and a very future-focused perspective on education. So for the principal who's thinking, I want to step away from business as usual, for the principal who's trying to step away from this testing factory mentality, what advice do you have to create that culture?
I think one piece of advice is I always say, where's the joy? Where are our children? Are they walking away each day from our classrooms and think, what's a moment of joy I had in my day? And where is joy for educators? Where is joy for teachers? Where is joy for principals? Because all of us in education have become involved in education because of our connection to children, because we want a better world. We want a world where our children are citizens, in a world where they can socially contribute. They have opportunities to have creative thoughts. So I think asking ourselves questions about, in our practice, what is joyful? I think also being able to read and research about what is happening in this on the creative platform of thinking about different ways of being and doing, and how play fits into that. And back to always thinking about our own philosophies of childhood. What do we think is important about childhood? Do we think we need to race through childhood? Do we think we need to give our children more time? I think it's coming back to, again, reading, research, philosophy, beliefs, joy, and I'll often talk about that, the concept of love when it comes to all of these things.
So Kim, if you were leading a school now, or again, where we're in this interim mode, and think primary or secondary, or running an early childhood center that, because of the COVID-19 reality, is for the next several weeks in some kind of disruption where a lot of the learning, maybe all the learning, has moved to learning from home. And teachers have moved the content online, and some of the processes are happening through the web portals. Many of them are engaging in their own way. But what would you recommend to those leaders that they pause for the little bit of time they might have with their leadership teams, their executives, so to speak, to rekindle just what you said, to get back the mojo of the reason we might even have a school when we're back in the physical space towards that we call school? And could we learn from this episode that notion of humanity you spoke of so well, so we don't get back in the rat race of what's your NAPLAN scores or what's your state test scores or end of grade or end of year, all these languages we use around the world? What could we do to learn from what you've just said to not do business as usual when we're back in whatever a new normal looks like?
Well, first of all, I think we need to pause for a moment and think about the most crucial thing happening in this context is well-being, safety for our children, physical safety, well-being safety in a mental context. Just being okay, being safe, being in their homes, feeling a sense of belonging, that we can discuss things, I can understand things, I'm able to express things. So I think it's very important. We've got to think of, we are not expecting homes to be school. You can't replicate school at home. I think it's very important that we don't pressure families with a whole lot of things that have to be pushed down onto children. I think it's really important that we have some established routines in a home context, and knowing that homes are different for everybody. Families are going through an enormous time of, there could be sickness in the family, there could be unemployment in the family. Our mental health and well-being is crucial. So we need to be kind and take it slowly. We need to think that there's many benefits of technology and online engagement, but it's wonderful to be offline as well. So not everything is going to be happening online for children and families. And especially for me in the early years, we're talking about play needs to be sprinkled throughout the day. Children are not meant to, and especially, well, our youngest children and even our older children, they're meant to move. They're meant to engage with nature, even if that means opening a balcony and breathing in some air, or being with plants, or going outdoors in the backyard, having that walk with a significant other in the neighbourhood while we still can. So we're saying that, yes, online learning has benefits, and it depending on what age and the context of your family situation. There are some people where internet access is really poor, or what devices are in at the home. What's happening when parents are needing devices to work from home? What's happening with our children? And it's to say that our children should have the opportunity to play in a way that interests them, and for us to be okay with that, because there's literacy and numeracy always present in play, and they're in the flow of expressing themselves, and we need to be listening to them through their words, through their drawing, through their behaviour, because now more than ever they need to feel safe and a sense of belonging to them, to their family and to community.
That's wonderful, Kim. Your focus on play and movement and environment and getting outside the box of what education is really, of what we traditionally have looked at education is really important. Are you optimistic about where we're going?
I think it's really important to be optimistic. I think that we can all individually contribute to having a hopeful world, a hope-filled world, because we have to create that future for ourselves and our children and their children. At times, it's very frustrating. I feel frustrated sometimes with education and what I think is sometimes being imposed, but I have a voice. I have a voice as a citizen, whether I'm a teacher, I'm a parent, I'm not involved in education, I could be, you know, any person in the community. Grandparents have particular strong voices. We all can advocate for what the future we want for our children, and our children are capable of advocating that for themselves. We can see what's happened with children with a voice through environmental issues, through sustainability. We underestimate the intellect and capabilities of children.
Kim, it's just wonderful to have had you on with us today. I think one of the exciting things about what you presented is that too often our parents often complain that they don't have enough time with their children. And this might be careful what you wish for, but we've been given the gift of time. And what you've also expressed is beyond in the school setting, to take the time, even for parents who are working from home, to let down the guard, get out the puzzles, create the imagination, come up with the big adventure, read. Cherish this opportunity. And if we do that, we're going to be okay on the other side of that. Scott and I are going to wrap up the episode, but we hate to do it because we could go on all day and we'd learn so much from you and I think inspire our listeners. We truly appreciate your coming on with us today. It was wonderful.
I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity. And you know what, I think relationship and connection is everything in this complex world at the moment. You know, we need to just have self-love and love for one another and trying to take care of each other and our children. So it's a pleasure to talk to you both, and thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Kim. I think now more than ever, I feel that we will get through this.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been episode 11 of We Will Get Through This. And what we're looking forward to is the opportunity to share this video and podcast with you and all the various sources you can get that from. And we look forward to our next episode coming on at this point. Scott, thanks again for this chance to spend time with you. This is a highly unusual time, and we're excited about to share some of our great network with the rest of the world so that they might learn and continue the journey to really get education right for every child. We look forward to seeing you again. Scott, take care. Have a great next few days, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You too. Bye-bye.